You're listening to the One Step Deeper podcast with your host, Jimmy Moore and Brittany Davis. OneStepDeeperPodcast.com.
You're back.
Look at you with the red on. It's matching my sign.
This is my new shirt. I got it from the TJ Maxx.
Yes, the TJ Maxx. Is that like the Facebook?
Yes, like the Facebook. Yeah. Yeah.
I've been told if you put the in front of it, it means you're a boomer, and you're a millennial. So
Maybe I don't know. I've never heard that, but we are the One Step Deeper podcast.
we are. Although in the title we don't put the in front of it, so we're very cool. We're very cool that way.
Yeah, totally.
Same
cool.
Same with our book. It's just One Step Deeper Journey. It's not the One Step Deeper Journey.
I'm sorry. I'm so excited. Anytime somebody mentions it, I just get so excited.
Hey, Brittany, you got a book coming out.
I know. Hey, audience, we got a book coming out.
Oh, we've been busting our tail during the break. And by the way, we're glad to be back. It feels like, we were talking about this earlier, it feels like it's been ages since we've been on this podcast. Now, you and I have talked quite a bit during the break, but it's been forever and a day. So we're very happy to be back here on the One Step Deeper podcast. We're at episode 49, so we're hitting the brand new year. Guys, we've got so many ideas for episodes this year. We don't know where we're going to put them all. That's why we had to start writing books. It's like we needed someplace else to kind of get the message out.
Yes. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yes. So what are we talking about here in episode 49?
So I remember when episode 49, yes, I remember when we first started talking about this, and this was one of those accidental topics as you and I were just talking, and it was like, we have to talk about that. And that is the narratives that we tell ourselves, honestly, the false narratives that we tell ourselves and how they really control our lives.
You're so close. I'm going to pull in a little closer so we can
be
similar. No.
Okay.
I was trying something new because I had the little earbud things in, and so I thought, let me push it away, but then you're like real close. So I'm like,
well, everybody needs to see me and my ridiculous amount of smiles.
You are definitely the best looking part of this show. But yes, the narratives we tell ourselves and how they shape us, how they direct our lives. I think we don't realize that the stories we tell ourselves, whether they're true or not, directly impact how we're living our life. So I'm really excited to talk about this topic here today. Great ones come back on in the new year. So really happy to be here in 2022, you guys. OneStepDeeperPodcast.com is the website. Go check us out over there. You can see all the past episodes. If you missed any of the first 48 episodes, go check them out. They're all right there. You can also watch these debuting on Sundays at 4 p.m. over on YouTube. Just type in a keyword search, One Step Deeper. You will find the show 4 p.m. Eastern time on Sundays. We also simulcast it also in video form on Instagram video, Facebook. Wherever you kind of get your stuff, go look us up, One Step Deeper. We make it very easy to find. Mondays, it is a traditional podcast. Go check us out over on any of your favorite podcasting formats, Spotify, Apple, Stitcher, or ALEXA, and you can find all of them there. And then, as always, if you like what we do here, which obviously you're still here, you still stick around, you like what these weirdo people are telling you, go leave us a review. 2022, I want to make it a resolution. I know Brittany's not a big fan of New Year's resolutions, but this is one I want to do. I want to see a bunch of reviews for the One Step Deeper podcast. I think what we do here is pretty cool, pretty special. We're obviously writing a book about it that's going to be out in a few weeks. And so go make our day and go leave us a review. But let's get into today's topic, Brittany. And I'm going to let you start off because I think those of us that have been through trauma, we have narratives. Not narratives necessarily of our own making, a little bit, and we'll talk about that here in a minute, but a lot of the narratives that we believe were told to us at a very early age, a very impressionable age, so that now we believe things that we don't actually believe, but because they were so hammered into us as the narrative of what we believe it.
I believe it. Yeah. Yeah. So I've been so like giddy to talk about this topic because, as always, I have multiple takes. Okay. I have the way you think it's going to go, and then I also have the blow it the other way. But let's start with the way you think it's going to go. So I want to talk about where this topic kind of came from and where. So Jimmy and I were talking about this narrative that I have had my entire life, that my dad didn't want to be in my life. My dad didn't love me. My dad didn't want to see me. My dad wanted no part of my life. And I believed that so internally, it became my identity. I let the narrative quite literally control every moment that I had around him. But I didn't create that narrative in my mind alone. It was influenced by the people around me of, if he loved you, he would X, Y, Z. If he loved you, he would, and oftentimes this is where these narratives begin to compile in our minds. It's not necessarily ourselves. It's our environment, and people start speaking and talking, and the little rumors and the little this and little that. And we begin to create these narratives. And I definitely want to talk about the narrative that you had. I mean, you don't have to go into detail, but I had really struggled my entire life. I'm 29 years old, and just now in the last 3-4 months, finally have a relationship with my dad because I was willing to go into this narrative, just blow it all away, just forget anything that anybody told me, and ask him the hard questions of, is this true? What actually happened? Give me your side of the story. Because up until that point, I wasn't willing to even hear him out because I was so convinced of the narrative that I've told myself, that he didn't love me, he didn't want to be around me, he wasn't proud of me. All of these things I convinced myself of, I never gave him a chance. So it was on me. And a little bit on the other people who convinced me of, but on me.
Well, on you, because that's what you had been led to believe. So again, the narrative fed into another narrative. And this is where it gets tricky, guys. Like, you start believing things initially, and then that's your worldview for believing a new narrative, even though the original narrative might be wrong, but now you believe the new narrative. I think this is why in America right now we have such division. I don't think we're actually as divided as everything seems. What's happening is people hear narratives, they buy into a narrative, and then that's their worldview. And then another group, they buy into a narrative, and that's their worldview. When at the end of the day, we probably have a lot more in common, but because these narratives become so pervasive, they become what we believe, and they never were true.
Yeah, absolutely. And like what you were saying, the things that I told myself about my dad shaped how I thought about myself. So because I thought that my dad didn't love me, and that my dad didn't want to be in my life, and my dad wanted nothing to do with me, because it was my parent that I'm having this narrative about, I then viewed myself as unlovable by anyone, and and people didn't want to be around me at all. Nobody wanted to be in my life. Nobody loved me. I didn't feel like I deserved to have things. I would quite literally work my ass off in school and trying to be the best kid that I could. And like, I never got in trouble because I wanted to earn the affection that I thought that I wasn't worthy of, because my own parent didn't love me, except he did, and so my entire life was shaped by this idea. And it's kind of crazy. I'm not gonna lie, when I kind of realized all this, and I had some really deep talks and for some vulnerable talks with my dad, and we kind of peel back all the layers of this, I had to call Jimmy and like, oh my gosh, wait a minute. My dad has always loved me. My dad has always wanted to be in my life. He stood back waiting because people were pushing him out. People made him and fed him this narrative that he was bad and that he did, and so here we are, we have these two narratives that are crashing against each other. And in the end, it really just took two people being extremely vulnerable and say, tell me what you actually believe of me. Tell me what you actually feel. And he had to do the same thing, and so it's kind of been crazy the last couple of months to just blow all that narrative away. But it's been there for 29 years. It still pulls at me.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you can't just overnight change what your mind has believed, for so long. And you alluded to earlier, I have a narrative as well that right at about 2.5 years ago, my stepfather dies, and I had this narrative in my mind about being shipped away to live with my dad, who ended up abusing me for 3.5 years. And so the narrative was that the stepdad had me sent away because he didn't want me in their life, and I was just a troublemaker. And then 2.5 years ago, I find out the stepdad did not have me sent away. My mom had me sent away. And when I heard her say that, I went, what? Because everything about how I had viewed this, I loathed that man, and I still loathe him even knowing this now. So I still loathe him because he didn't have any love for me at all. But then I was like, well, wait a minute. Why did you send me away? And she's like, well, I was afraid that he was going to kill you if you stuck around here. And we'll talk about that another time. But like it was mind blowing. And then the big narrative that changed for her was she didn't realize that that action sent me to an abusive man. She had no idea until 2.5 years ago that I had the shit beat out of me and berated and all these things that my dad fed into me mentally and then physically hitting me. So that was a belief system that for many years I resented my stepfather, which again, he wasn't a nice man. So I'm not trying to say he was great, but he wasn't the reason.
Right.
Although I wonder if I would have any relationship with my mom today if I knew that she was the one that had me sent away. And I remember coming home when I was in my early 20s and saying, I don't think I could forgive you guys for sending me away. And again, she had no idea what happened to me when I was a kid and so, a teenager. So it is amazing how these narratives become pervasive in our lives. We believe them, and even backing up further, and not meaning to hog so much, but backing up further, when I was a kid, my dad was very crafty at feeding narratives into my head. He would pit me and my brothers against each other. And, oh, you know, your brother's a piece of shit and you don't want to grow up to be like him. You want to do something better with your life. He would say that kind of thing. And then he'd go to my younger brother and say the same thing about me. And I didn't realize it in the moment, but he actually got me to turn on my own brother, Kevin, and think badly of him. And then he would call me out. How dare you feel that way about your brother, even though he was the one that planted that narrative in my mind, that negative stigma about him. And I remember how confused I felt, how awful I felt. Like, why do I feel this way about my brother who I loved to death? God rest his soul. And it was just amazing that all it took was one person feeding a narrative into my mind, and that's what became truth for me.
Right. And while we're on that topic, I wanted to point out, I was kind of elusive myself. I didn't really say fully, but, I've shared my story of, the sexual abuse that I experienced as a child. That was my mom's ex-husband. So at the time he was my stepdad. Obviously he's no longer in my life, has been long removed from my life. I was 15 when he was removed from my life, and I haven't seen him since. And so he was the one that would feed this narrative. And while we're going into, and by the way, guys, One Step Deeper Journal, all of the in-depths of our stories are going to be in there, but just giving you a little taste of that. My stepdad at the time would feed these narratives of he doesn't love you. He doesn't want you. If he loved you, he would show up for you, except he never let me call my dad. He never let me reach out and say, hey, I want to come to your house. And so my dad, the whole time, believed that I didn't want to see him. And it was this guy on the outside driving this narrative. And I believed that so much, he isolated me to where he was dad. He was the only thing. And because he drove this narrative in so much, everybody around me was then quieted, and I was so alone. It set up the perfect opportunity for him to sexually abuse me, because he had alienated everybody else that I could talk to, because he told me that I was unworthy of XYZ. My mom didn't want to talk to me because of this. And in the book, you'll read a specific instance of where he had convinced me that I did something that I know I didn't do, but he was so conniving and manipulative that he made me believe that about myself because he sold
Yes.
this narrative so hard. And this is what our brain does outside of other people. Our brain convinces us so much that it becomes our identity, that even though we know we didn't do the thing, we know the truth, we can't see into the truth because the narrative is blocking our view. It becomes just blinders of this is all we see, and our narrative is all we see. Just like you said, with politics and things that are going on in the world around, if you just for 1 second, everybody is like this, looking straight ahead of whatever narrative they're believing. I have family members who I can't talk to. I literally cannot have a civil conversation with them because they have their narrative view of what's happening, and I'm like, but widen just a little bit, and you can't get past it. And so I think it's a lot. This is a heavy topic for us to pull that, like, for
Yeah.
us to start in on 2022. But I think it's just, guys, just sense the atmosphere. This is where we're going. We're just taking this even deeper into 2022. What you have experienced so far in the first 48 episodes, guys, just get ready. Just get ready.
I remember when we were talking about this subject, I was telling you about the teenage years when I was getting abused. And the narratives I was hearing from my dad is, you're worthless, you're a piece of shit, you need to be in reform school. Never mind, I was an honor roll student. Never mind, I was a good kid, didn't smoke, chew, or go with girls who do. I was doing all the right things. That's a Southern expression for those of you who don't know. I don't smoke or chew or go with girls who do. And he would feed these things, and no girl will ever want to be with you. That stuff stuck with me. And if I'm being super honest, it made me desperate in relationships. It made me settle. It made me not really want to strive for the best because I'm a piece of shit. I should just die. Yeah. Nobody's ever going to want to be around me. All these like negative stigmas that even to this day, Brittany, if I'm being honest, they're still there.
Yeah,
they're still there. I squelch them hard because I've overcome all that stuff pretty hard, but I still battle that mindset. And I'm starting to tear up a little bit just thinking about it. It's just
out there. Yeah.
When you have those narratives that are so strongly instilled in you, especially at a younger age, when you were 12 to 15, that was very impressionable. For me, it was 13 to 17, very impressionable. You don't just undo that damage. That narrative sticks, and you can do all the cognitive behavioral therapy. You can do all the going to see a therapist and talking about it with people and having friends to share in. It still pops up. Pops up.
I have a weird visual, but I'm a visual person. So if there's anybody else listening that's a visual person, maybe this will help. So when we're young and these narratives that are told us, especially by people who are monumental in our life, people like parents, grandparents, people that tell us stuff like that, it's like we have a dry erase board inside of us. And people who tell us nice things are just written in dry erase and they're easily erased. But the things and the narratives like, you're stupid, you'll amount to nothing, no girl will ever want you, that's written in permanent marker on your dry erase board. And the problem is,
it's written in more than permanent marker. It's etched in with a knife that cuts deep.
Yes. And it doesn't matter how many times you fill it in. I was going to say with the permanent marker, it doesn't matter how many times you try to erase it with your typical eraser, it's not going anywhere. And even if you manage to scrape and scrub it off, you're going to have a yellow mark left in the dry erase board where it's still there. And so that's where these narratives is so important. Like even now, as we're going through the books, let me just be 100% honest with you guys. I am loving the process of writing this book. But also while writing this book, I have dealt with the worst imposter syndrome I have ever dealt with. I have been on the phone with Jimmy multiple times a week, just literally saying things out loud like, I'm not good enough for this. Who would read anything that I would ever write? And all this is not what I actually believe. It's all of those narratives from my past. I can still audibly hear the stepdad's voice. I can still hear the things he said to me that I wasn't good enough, and it didn't matter if I made perfect grades. I was still a piece of shit. I remember those things. And so it's so important when you're dealing with the narratives that you tell yourself, that you give yourself, the time to just kind of like go into it and really, really examine it. Is it truth? Or is it a complete lie that you've oh goodness, sorry. Is it a complete lie that you've believed for so long that it's etched into that dry erase board?
Yeah, and you don't really break free from that until you have somebody that comes into your life that can articulate what the truth is. You have been that for me in a lot of ways, because I remember when we first became friends and we started doing this, talking a little bit, I noticed that you would be like, so why are you that way? And I never dawned on me that I believed certain ways and had certain kind of things that were who I was. And I remember you asking kind of bluntly, is that what you believe? Is that what you believe? And you kind of made me stop in my tracks and go, I don't know. It's what I've always believed. And so that was like the matriculation of us going one step deeper in our personal conversations. And I've done the same thing to you. I've asked you, like, why are you that way? Oh.
But just because it's something that you've always believed doesn't mean that it's true.
That's
I
right.
try to tell this to people who are in the older generation who just like kind of fight against anything that's new that comes along. I'm like, I understand your hesitancy because it's new to you, which makes it foreign, which makes it uncomfortable. I understand. But give yourself 30 seconds to just actually look into it and actually form your own opinion outside of the masses. Don't go on social media looking for your opinion on a stance. Look at things yourself and then develop your stance. This is what I did almost 4 years ago now when I threw everything away. I was tired of people I was tired of the narrative. I'm like, I'm done with people telling me how to think, how to believe, how to move, how to think, how to parent, how to be in a relationship. I'm sick and tired of it. I want to know for myself. I want to go through each of these topics. And I have one after another, a lot like our journal is written out. This is what I would do. I would take this information and I would fill up, and then I'd ask myself a couple of questions. And maybe I wasn't done. Maybe I had to go over that same, religion and stuff. I had to like keep going and keep going and keep going and go, do I believe that? Do I actually believe that? I had to ask me that same question that you've definitely asked me and I've asked you of, do I really believe this? Is this something that I actually believe? And if it is something, why do I believe it? If you cannot tell yourself why, if you don't have a reason for why you believe what you believe, chances are it's not real. It's not a belief that you should have. If you cannot have a solid reason why you believe what you believe. And then,
And that's
going back into this narrative, be careful that if you do have a why for what you believe, that it's not tied up into a narrative.
and that solid reason why you believe isn't just because, well, so and so told me. Because so and so telling you, they're part of the narrative that has been created in your head. And
Yeah.
unless you trust them, I mean, there's very few people I would hear something from them, then I would just automatically believe. You're one of them, my mom and my sister. You three, y'all are the three people in my life that if I heard something from you, I might want to go vet it out, but I'll immediately go, I trust you enough, I'll believe it. Yeah, I mean, but everyone else, you sus. You on the radar. We're gonna look you up. We're gonna chop you up and down because I don't believe you.
Right.
Sorry, not sorry.
Yeah. I give it the, I'm not sure about that. I'll get back to you. I give it that doesn't sit right with me. But yeah, pretty much if it comes from Jimmy, actually, all right, we're just being honest here. Even my closest friend, Jimmy, and my husband, Wildman, I still question things that they say to me.
Yeah.
Because of the narratives that have been in my mind. The people that I'm closest with. I have been married to Wildman for 10 years. We've been together for 11 years. That man is my world. He turns my world, okay? But when he's like, you look good, I'm like, ugh, gross, don't say that. Because that's, there's such a deep narrative written and etched into who I am. I can't believe that from him. Even though I know he loves me, I know he cares for me. When Jimmy compliments me, when he started Guys, when Jimmy would give me compliments and feedback about the book, and it would be like nothing negative, and I'd be like, "You're lying. You're not. Whatever. No, that's
it was
not
worse
real."
than that, guys. She was like this. And I'm just like, can you speak English words? Because I don't know what means.
My perceptions are clouded. My
Yes.
future perceptions and my perceptions in everyday life are clouded by the narratives that have been told to me. And even though I am actively trying to get rid of them and trying to dismantle them and unlearn all the things that I've been told, even though I'm doing that work, I still struggle. And you know that we were not going to get through this first episode back without me talking about Joe Dispenza, who I have found during our podcast break. I have found this guy named Joe Dispenza, Dr. Joe Dispenza. I like literally just started listening to his stuff and I'm blown away. One of the things that he was saying is our thoughts and our feelings are two different things. But when you think something, you feel something. And as you feel something, you begin to think it more, and then it becomes a spiral, both positive and negatively. So when you think a thought based on a narrative that you believe, it becomes what you feel. And so the thought is, I'm insecure. Well, then I begin to feel insecure, and feeling insecure leads me to thinking all these negative things about myself. I don't even want to say them out loud. I'm this, I'm that, I'm all the things we tell ourselves when we look in the mirror. Okay. And because I'm now speaking those things out loud, I'm thinking them again. I am planting a narrative inside of myself as my thoughts become my feelings and my feelings become my thoughts.
And it's a narrative that you yourself believe that you believe because you've reiterated. You're hitting on something great here. You've reiterated what's been told to you by someone else, even once, one time from somebody, becomes a part of your psyche.
Yeah.
Then in your psyche, you're processing on your brain noodles, as you like to say, processing all of that. And then you're verbalizing it back to yourself as you're looking in the mirror or whatever. And then at that point, you do believe the narrative, even though it was never, ever, ever true. Now that you've spoken the words of it, it's become true for you.
I have one, guys. I have something that plays over in my head. Oh my goodness. So there's a lady in our family. She is basically the matriarch of the family at this point. She's in her 90s. And I love her. She's very sweet. But when I was a kid, I think I was, 7 or 8. I mean, I was little and I was chunk. Okay. I loved all the sweet things. Totally acceptable. Okay. I'm not downing myself in that time. Well, I had 2 cousins, and we would go play in this playroom. And my 2 cousins sit me down to go get a plate of dessert for us to share. I used to love dessert, all kinds of dessert, cake, pie, ice cream, cookies, muffins. I used to love it all. I walk down, I get the plate of dessert. I'm taking the plate of dessert to go share, but she didn't know that. And Aunt May was like, and that's why you're fat. Aunt May. So I take the plate up to my cousins. I cry my eyes out in the bathroom. And from that moment, I don't eat cake anymore. I don't eat pie anymore. Really, I eat cookies. That's about all I would eat. And I really don't like cake, guys. It's not even that big of a deal. I don't eat donuts. I don't like donuts. Like, I don't like those things. But how much of that was that moment that I convinced myself, well, I don't like those things anymore because those make me fat.
Yeah. I remember when you told that story on this very podcast last year, that same story, and it broke my heart because that right there, that moment was just a flashpoint. And that sweet lady today probably doesn't even remember saying that to you. She doesn't remember.
No, she doesn't.
That was 20 years ago, 21 years ago. She's not going to remember that she did. And plus, you said she's 90 now, so she was already old as dirt 20 years ago. So.
She's so sweet, and I've talked to her and had conversations with her, after this point, and it's not a big deal, but it's been a big deal in my mind for so long.
It's a big deal in as much as it's still a narrative that prevents you from thinking a certain way, and I guess let me throw a positive spin on narratives. Some narratives may keep you out of trouble. I think often too, and this is just Jimmy trying to shine a turd. You can't actually shine a turd, by the way. Look it up.
A lot of people ask me, Jimmy, how do you get such good deep sleep? Well, there's a lot of things that I do, but one of the newest things that I recently added is this upgraded magnesium from a company called Upgraded Formulas. Go to their website, upgradedformulas.com, and you can learn all about this nano technology that they use for this particular mineral of magnesium. Again, it's called Upgraded Magnesium, and it's got all the different forms of magnesium in it using the nanotechnology, so it gets absorbed a lot better. Guys, I have seen my deep sleep improve by as much as 30 to 40% simply by adding in this product along with sunshine exposure, darkness in the room, cooler temperature, all of the things that I always have done. So again, upgradedformulas.com is the website. Go check them out.
When my dad told me no girl will ever want you, you know what that did for Jimmy? It stopped Jimmy from jumping too quickly. Who's to say I wouldn't have jumped quickly at some girl in college, maybe got her pregnant, and maybe had to do the right thing because I would have been an upstanding guy and married and da-da-da, and maybe it was the wrong thing. Who knows?
Yeah,
and maybe that wouldn't have worked out. But also the narrative pushed me in directions in my life that I probably shouldn't have gone as well. So, I mean, it can cut both ways. Sometimes narratives can be good if they produce results and are productive in our lives. But most of the time, narratives fed into us and not things that we tell ourselves, they are destructive and they leave a wake of calamity mentally, life experiences. Just you have regret, a lot of regret about your life, because especially when you kind of go back and go, oh, if I had only known then what I know now about that narrative, I would not have made that choice. I would have definitely chosen differently. I would have lived my own self. This is why you hear Brittany and I always talk about live your authentic self, who you are, discover who that person is. Our journal, our book is going to just go way, way deep in making you examine who you are so that you can rewrite those narratives. The narratives you have in your mind are what probably have been fed there. We want you to write your own story, your own narratives of what you believe. So then you can go and live who you are and stop living the life of people that, quite frankly, did not have your best interest in mind.
And I think I wanted to point out a good narrative too. Both you and I have told a lot of the bad narratives that we believed, but I want to tell a good one that I want to credit my dad for. Obviously, you guys know I wasn't close to my dad, but anything he ever said, I took it as gold because Dad said it. And I remember being 15 and dating this guy who was really crappy. He treated me very crappy, which was not a surprise to me. Looking back now, I was just repeating the process of what I saw. I was attracted to guys who treated me crappy, you know? And so for a long time, it surprised me that I ended up with someone like Wildman who does treat me so well. And I was confused by it because I broke the pattern, but I couldn't tell you how. Well, I narrowed it down to a narrative that my dad spoke over to me. When I was dating this guy, it was bad for me. My dad never said no. He never said, stay away from him. He never did that. He said, if you truly believe that this is the life that you want and that you deserve, then go for it. And that's all he said to me. And so I went home and I was like, I don't deserve this. I don't deserve to be treated this way. And after that, I don't know. I guess I didn't stop dating bad guys. I had another guy that treated me pretty crappy,
but it raised your standard to the eventual husband that you're now married to in your 11th year and have three kids with. So it stuck. That narrative is a positive one. And I had not heard that one before. So thank you for sharing that, about how Mike fed into you. Is that the life you want? Is that, oh, okay, go ahead. And it planted this seed in you to create your own narrative. He didn't create that narrative. You created the narrative.
Yeah.
He just nudged you in that direction. And look, guys,
Yeah. That's what we want to do.
Yes, we want to be nudgers. We don't want to be forcing our way into people. This podcast is just nothing more than a nudge. If we nudge you in the direction of something that then you take it and you run with it, that's your narrative. You've created the narrative you want. We're not telling you how to live your life.
Yeah.
Honestly, we haven't figured it all out yet. We're still kind of going through the process of this, but we figured a lot of things out for ourselves. We've been through some really horrific things in our lives, and we've rewritten a lot of the narratives in our life and still working on those things.
Okay, so I think it's time for me to take the other side of this. That as I was thinking about this topic, I was like, oh, yes, tough love. I'm so ready. All right. So just like we feed into these narratives, these negative narratives, how many people in your life who are sometimes narcissists say things like, well, I'm a good parent because I did such and such and such, but they missed the mark by a mile. But I'm a good parent because I didn't do that. I'm a good parent because I didn't sexually abuse you, so that makes me a good parent. And they feed this narrative, and they're so convinced that they were a good parent or a good person that they overlook their own mistakes. They overlook their own things. You know, I know you and I both have dealt with this, where we have parents in our life who are so convinced that because they didn't do what their parents did to them, that they were a good parent. Never like diving through the in-depths of what they did and go, yes, I'm better than that, but I still didn't treat you the way you deserve. But they can't see that. You know, for me, examples, you know, with my girls, I raise my voice. I'm not perfect, but I also realize I'm not going to go around and say, well, I'm a good parent because I don't beat you like my parents beat me.
Or the other day when we had a conversation, somebody said something along the lines of, well, your parents did the best they could. And I know that irks you to know it as well, because it's like, okay, the best they could? No, they did not do the best they could. Because if they did the best they could, they would have loved me more. They would have been more present in my life. They would have encouraged me. They would have been a parent to me. And quite frankly, you've been their parent more than they've been your parent.
Yeah, I mean, and some of the other things that I wrote down, that we convince ourselves, I can't do XYZ because of XYZ. I told myself a narrative for a very long time. I couldn't work out at all because of my scars, but I lied to myself. I stole from myself. There was a time when, yes, I needed to sit and plant my butt on the couch and do nothing and let my body heal, but I could walk. And I didn't do that because I convinced myself that I couldn't. And I fed that narrative. I lied to myself. And it took 75 hard to prove to myself, girl, you was lying. You was lying to yourself. And can I continue doing 75 hard every day of my life? Heck no, that took a lot out of me. But it proved to me what I am capable of. I'm sorry.
You said it. You said it right. Keep going.
Another narrative that I have heard that people convince themselves, I don't have any trauma. Really? Okay. You just keep believing that, you know, or it's we lie to ourselves and create this narrative that we're good, or that there's nothing, you know, that there's nothing that we need to fix. There's nothing that we need to go deeper on. And so and let's be honest, in order to break down those narratives, you have to be vulnerable, you know, and it's hard being vulnerable. But, you know, people in your life who've abused you, in order for that, like, they truly believe they did nothing wrong. That's their narrative. They think that they've done nothing wrong to harm you or hurt you.
To this day,
Mm-hmm.
they'll deny what they did. And if I start talking about, you know, you made me believe this and believe that, I didn't make you do anything. And they'll believe that, not realizing that I was very impressionable. The abuse made the impression all the more. The narrative stuck more, because if you didn't believe the narrative, you got the shit beat out of you. You got scolded.
Yeah.
I don't want to know what would have happened if the mental strength of Jimmy today at 50 years old would have pushed back at 14, 15. I
Yeah.
would be dead today.
Yeah. I mean, who knows? It could happen. And that's what I'm saying. The other side of this is that when we're around people who believe these narratives that they did nothing wrong, or that they convince themselves, and because it's hard. Okay, nobody wants to admit that they've done something wrong. I don't know. I don't mind admitting that I've done something wrong, but I've
Yeah.
practiced that a lot.
Yeah.
But yeah, like even myself, and they use it as an excuse. I've found things to, like I said, I stopped working out. I used my thing as an excuse. Also, you pointed this out to me the other day, and I've been kind of ruminating on it. I'm like, oh God, he is right. When I got my diagnosis of ADHD, I milked that one for everything it was. Oh, I'm struggling today because my ADHD is bad. Yeah, I milked that one for everything that it was worth, except I've had ADHD my entire life, and I've still managed to get things done. Having the diagnosis shouldn't change anything. Yes, I have struggles. I have things and obstacles that I have to get through, but I've done them so far. So what makes it any different now? And so I've had to break down that narrative.
The only good thing about that narrative, by the way, of the diagnosis is it explained a lot of inexplicable things in your life. So I was happy for that. But then it went the other way for you. It's like, well, therefore, because I have ADHD, I'm this and this and this and this and this. And you had all these TikTok videos and they were wonderful. Yeah. But then after a while, I'm like, you were one direction, you swung to the other direction. And the middle right here is where that narrative is true for you. Yes. Because once you believe the ADHD thing, which was totally valid, and yeah, you've had it your whole life, you learned to manage, but like were perplexed about things when you didn't know about it. But then when you knew about it, you knew too much about it. You read too much into it. You watched every freaking ADHD TikToker out there. Oh, well, yeah, okay. Well, that's me. Same with Enneagram. You're talking about your Enneagram 1. Well, I'm the Enneagram 1. And so therefore, that's why I'm da-da-da-da-da. And all of these things are tools for information to try to learn more about yourself. But we don't need to so closely tie ourselves to those things that then that becomes the new narrative rather than what we actually believe.
Yeah, the Joe Dispenza, our thoughts produce our feelings, and our feelings therefore control our thoughts. But at the end, if we can just capture the thought process. So yeah, like I love Enneagram. I think it's a great tool. But I found myself reading all of these things and applying them to my life going, well, I'm an Enneagram 1. That's just how I am. And you know how bad I hate that statement so much. That's just who I am. It's just my personality. But again, let me bring Joe Dispenza in this again. Is it your personal, oh gosh, hold on. Your personality is either becomes your personal reality, or your personal reality becomes your personality. Which one is it? And so when you convince yourself, or you tell yourself this narrative that, oh, I'm an Enneagram 1 and that's how I have to believe, it becomes your personal reality and becomes your personality. And so, how much of that is actually true?
We do that a lot in our culture. I think about the people that buy into the horoscope. And if you're one of those people, I don't mean to offend you, but there are people that are so into the horoscope that they let that become the narrative of their life. Oh my gosh, this describes me. Or when you open a fortune cookie, oh wow, that's so me. And it's like, oh. We're very impressionable in that way. And if people didn't let themselves get impressed like that so easily, especially when you're an adult. Like when you're a child, okay, it's different. But maybe you're that way as an adult because as a child you were highly impressed to believe narratives, and it just becomes this thing that's a part. Your belief is you believe everybody else.
Oh, some people come to mind. Some people come to mind.
A lot of people.
Oh man, yeah. Oh wow. I'm sorry, that one just like took me aback, because yeah, there are people in my life who believe what they believe only because of the people around them told them what to believe. And yes. I can't be that person.
No, No, I'm too much of a thinker. I'm too much of a self-sufficient, analyzing. Like our conversations are us analyzing what each other is saying through our own prism and what we believe about it. It's why we work as friends, because
Right.
I'll tell you things and you're like, oh wow, I hadn't thought of it that way. Well, this is how I believe. Oh wow, didn't think of it that way. And it's okay to hear other viewpoints. It's not okay that those viewpoints become your viewpoints just by default without you processing and see if that's what you believe. I've had people in my life, whatever I believed, they believed. It was a whole monkey see, monkey do kind of thing. That gets old very fast. If I'm around someone and it's like, yeah, me too. Yeah, I believe that too. Oh yeah, I believe that. And it's like, you can't possibly. I would throw something stupid in there just to see if they'd go along. Yeah, me too. I'm like, no, 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 no,
Yeah.
no.
Yeah.
We're not playing that game.
Yeah. One of the topics that I wanted to touch on that I want to be understanding, because I struggle with this as well. I do have the diagnosis of anxiety. I have had the struggle of anxiety my entire life. However, I'm sorry, I'm just smiling at myself because you begin to play into it so much that you convince yourself of something. And so I don't like crowds. That is a truth. That's not a narrative. That's a truth. I don't like crowds because I don't like loud noises. I don't like loud noises because of my childhood trauma. Loud is triggering for me. So that's why I don't like crowds. I know where that comes from. However, even though I don't want to put myself in a position of crowds, I convince myself that my anxiety is so bad that I can't be around crowds. And yeah, it's hard for me, but I've created a narrative that, oh, like right now, I almost refuse to go to the grocery store unless it's like 6 a.m. and there's nobody there. But I convince myself of the anxiety, and then the anxiety becomes my thought, and then the thought becomes my feeling. It's around feeling anxiety, and once you're feeling it, you can't stop it. I don't know, if you've struggled with anxiety like to the level that I have, but like once the thought starts and you don't stop it at that very moment, it just becomes your entire body. I feel it on my chest, and once that feeling on my chest hits, there's no stopping the brain spiral that comes from the anxiety. But I have people in my life who get stuck in the anxiety spiral. They think one thought of, I can't do this thing because I have anxiety. And so then when they go to do that thing, they automatically create the anxiety. It becomes something that we create because of the narrative. And again, listen, I am trying to be very delicate because I don't want to tell people, oh, you don't have anxiety. That's crap. That's not what I'm saying. I know that it's true. I've felt it myself. I have had my own issues, but I have to ask myself how much of this diagnosis, just like with ADHD, how much of this anxiety diagnosis am I continuing to use as an excuse to not do the thing? Tough love. I know, but that's kind of what we do here. We make you examine. Again, like Jimmy said earlier, we're not trying to convince you of anything. We just want you to examine these things that you've told yourself for so long, these narratives that you've told yourself, and just peel back the layers of them.
Well, and look at it this way. When you believe narratives that aren't necessarily true or that you don't actually believe, you're actually robbing yourself of opportunities. And I'm in the dating world now. I'm seeing a few girls, and I've come to the conclusion that their narrative about the guys they've been with in their past becomes what's true about all guys in their life. And along comes me, and I think I'm different than other guys. And so I start talking to them, and they respond as if I'm their narrative of their past relationships. That's been hard for me to circumnavigate because I'm sitting, and I've talked to you many times about, wait a minute, I'm not those things. These guys treated them like shit, and now I'm getting the brunt of how they treated them. So their narrative, they can't wrap their heads around that somebody can be different than the narrative of what they believed.
The reason why it's so easy for them to believe that, and so easy for people who struggle with anxiety to believe that, is because we are quite literally programmed as a human species to pay more attention to the negative, because that means survival. Except we're not running from the saber-toothed tigers anymore. We've evolved. But things like driving, or the things like going to the store, or things like, what you're saying, it shapes us, and that becomes what we're fearful of. And because we're just programmed to find to stick and believe the negative, we're so used to that. And yet, again, I have convinced myself of these same things. I lay on the couch, I'm like, I'm tired today, I'm not going to be able to accomplish anything at all, except if I would just lay there for an hour, then I could go get my stuff done. But I convince myself, because I go into the negative and I believe the negative, I believe the narrative, because it's so much easier to believe those things, because it's a survival thing,
Yeah, and in that light, I believe the narrative that I'm terrified of dogs. So you know what I've done? I've been purposeful about this. I've made myself be around dogs. I walk on this trail. I'm probably going to go as soon as we're done recording here today. I walk on this trail. It's about 4 miles, the whole trail that the path that I take. And I pass 6 dogs on the way. And every one of them barks at me. I remember I was texting you the other day, and I was like, yeah, and here's one of the dogs. And he was like, "Rrr, rrr, rrr," right next to me. And I'm like, all right, I'm getting better at it. The narrative that I'm scared of dogs, I'm trying to reframe that. Because I was bit when I was a kid. I was bit in the face by a Doberman Pinscher. And so it's trauma that I never really dealt with. And so this is kind of my therapy. And these narratives can become so deeply embedded in you when they come along with the little side dish of trauma. So keep that in mind, guys, that traumatic experience, it doesn't have to be childhood trauma, really anything traumatic, an adverse event, if it's associated with this belief that you have, this narrative that you believe in your life, it's going to make it all the more real, because it's associated with this thing that you need therapy for.
I think that's the difference in what we were talking about earlier with the dry erase board. That's the difference in the permanent marker and the etching. The trauma is the etching.
Yeah.
When you have trauma surrounding something, like you were bitten by the dog, that's quite literally etched there. That's not permanent marker. That's going to be over and over and over reminding yourself that you are safe, and you never know, because they're dogs, they're creatures, they're animals, you never know. And so there's still that fear there, and it's understandable. And guys, I'm not trying to tell you that your feelings are not valid, okay? They're 100% valid. I will never invalidate something that you're feeling, even though, that feeling may be tied into a narrative. I'm not trying to tell you that your feelings aren't valid, but just start to examine them. Examine the reasons why you think the things you do, and examine those things, just like Jimmy's doing with his being bit by the dog. Like, there's trauma there, and it's going to take a while to remind himself, I'm safe, they're behind a fence, and I have trauma too, I have triggers too, and I have to remind myself, I'm not there anymore, I'm not in that room anymore, I'm not being traumatized anymore, I can do this. It's difficult to break down these narratives, but it's possible.
And you broke down some last year. One of the ones was you actually handled the fireworks. Was it 4th of July fireworks? You handled them well, and you've never been able to. So that narrative that loud noises cause you trauma and you curl, not always. It's changing, because you've changed that around.
Yes, exactly. That was a good one to bring up, that the fireworks have always immediate loud noise. Balloons are still a high fear of mine. I don't like being around balloons. But it's because
see if I can find that balloon here somewhere.
If you don't stop, oh gosh, my children know they missed out on the part of childhood, because if you don't stop it,
it's just elements.
I'm like sweating. I'm sweating over here thinking about balloons. But that's because of the loud noises. I have a very big fear of alligators, and that's the one that I have started to tackle. That's a long story that I don't think we have time for, but
You
we'll do
you
that
told
one.
you told that story last year as well. You tell a lot of stories on here. I remember them all.
This is what I do, okay? And
I
maybe
know.
bring this back around, something that I did in high school called story time. Maybe we can bring that around on the podcast, because I do tell a lot of stories and they're captivating.
It's story time with Brittany Lee Davis. Tune in next week as we have another exciting story on the One Step Deeper podcast. Guys, that's episode 49. Yes, we're getting silly, so it's time to end the show. Episode 49. We are so happy to be back. And this message today was just incredible. We tell ourselves narratives, don't we? We allow those things to become our belief, and they affect our lives whether we realize it or not. So hopefully we've given you some good information today. Think about those things that you believe, why you believe them. We're always telling you, ask yourself why. And if you get to the dig deeper and get to the root causes of why, then you'll usually find out what you actually believe. Take us home.
All right, guys. One Step Deeper Podcast .com is the website, and you can watch all of the past episodes pretty much wherever you are on social media. But on Sundays at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time over on YouTube, they debut there. That's the first place. If you're one of those people, you just got to see it first. That's where you're going to see it first. 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, YouTube. All the episodes go up on Facebook and Instagram as well. On my personal page, becoming.Brittany Lee, I put up the tidbit. I let Jimmy and then the One Step Deeper Podcast Instagram page put up the full podcast, so you can find the link there. It is in, when I post the tidbit, the links are there for you to find the full episode. We are a typical podcast, so you can find us wherever you listen to podcasts, Spotify, Apple, Stitcher. You can listen to us on ALEXA. And lastly, guys, leave us a review. We love hearing from you guys. Message us on our private Instagram if you want to. Obviously, we prefer the reviews on like the Apple. Like, give us a review. But if you have a specific topic that you're in mind for this year, Jimmy is Living Low Carb Man. I'm becoming.Brittany Lee over on Instagram. I love you guys. It's good to be back.
And guys, we are loaded for bear in 2022. Brittany and I have high hopes with this podcast of bringing you probably around 50 episodes of amazing content, so stick around. We also have our book coming out, the One Step Deeper Journal, The Foundations, and I'm going to put on the screen right now a picture of what it looks like. So that's the front cover, you guys. Go check it out. Hopefully going to have it on Amazon very soon. It will be in paperback. It will be in hardback. It will be in Kindle and in Audible audiobook. You and I have to record the audiobook here very soon. But that'll be fun because we're podcasters and people know our voice, so it'll be fun. But guys, you're going to love the journal. Cannot wait to get into a full episode just talking about the One Step Deeper podcast or journal, the foundations. And then should we tell them about what happens maybe later this year? So later this year, we have an idea. It's not anything planned yet, but the idea is to do a One Step Deeper conference. So no details about it. We just have big high hopes and dreams, but stay tuned. We'll tell you all about that. And until next week, we'll see you then.
OneStepDeeperPodcast.com.